The dust was still hanging in the air like an embarrassed ghost when I stepped off the skiff. The ground of Faraz 9 crackled under my boots, brittle and blackened from whatever fancy orbital barrage had turned this mining settlement into a geological stew. I adjusted the busted breather mask on my face, not because I needed to, but because it gave me something to do that was look around nervously. The HUD in my left eye lens flickered like it was trying to wink at me. It was not romantic. The atmosphere smelled like cooked lithium and regret. Another Tuesday. I didn't come here for heroism or heartbreak. I came for scrap, sellable tech, maybe some unbroken cryosols or one of those sweet old AI memory cores. The place was supposed to be empty, just ghosts and silence and salvageable disappointment. But about 30 steps in, I heard something that was not the wind. It wasn't the screech of a ruptured pipe or the groan of melting support beams. It was softer, fragile, a whimper, and I made the mistake of going toward it. The sound led me past what was left of a collapsed dwelling, probably a supervisor's unit once upon a bureaucracy. My boots snagged on a beam, and I went down like dignity in a zero-gravity bar fight. Swearing in 3 languages, I scrambled up, shoved debris aside, and that's when I saw her. Tiny, barely breathing, skin like pale silver, drenched in something too viscous to be human blood, glowing faintly like it had ideas about being its own nightlight. Her eyes, one swollen shut, the other wide open and locked on mine, weren't the kind of eyes a kid should have. They were the kind you find in old books or war footage. Timeless. Tired, I froze. She didn't. She reached toward me and her fingers brushed mine. Cold, clammy, definitely not human. Also minor detail, she had fangs. Not subtle, I just went to CosplayCon ones either. These look custom forged for arterial enthusiasm. Of course, I muttered. Why wouldn't she be a tiny vampire in a crater? Classic. She blinked, said nothing. I scooped her up, careful not to jar whatever looked broken, which was almost everything. Her clothes were ceremonial-looking if you were into that sort of thing. I liked jumpsuits and things that didn't sparkle ominously in the sunlight. All right, I whispered. We're gonna get you out of here. And if you bite me, I swear on all that's breathable, I'm dropping you in a bin. She didn't bite me. Yet. Getting her back to the skiff was a tactical nightmare. I had to dodge a cluster of still-burning storage tanks and a swarm of territorial scavenger drones that mistook her shiny outfit for premium loot. I ended up throwing a decoy emitter to distract them. It emitted a hologram of a dancing llama in a tutu. Don't ask me why I have that programmed. It saved my life twice. By the time we were airborne, she had passed out, or possibly slipped into some form of interdimensional meditation. Either way, she was quiet, which was nice because I was screaming inside. I took her to Port Arco, the only semi-legal docking zone this side of the asteroid belt that didn't ask too many questions. The local doc, who was actually just a former tax auditor with a med drone license, took one look and said, I don't have the tools for this. Or the insurance. So I rigged up my own medbay using leftover parts from a catering bot and a cryosuit processor. It beeped a lot. The kid stabilized, sort of. I spent the next 2 days figuring out how to feed her, which turned out to be surprisingly easy. She liked sour gel packs, hated protein sticks, tried to eat my thermal gloves, bit my toolbox, slept in the oxygen reclamation drawer. I named her Noodle, because she curled up like one. By the 3rd night, I'd convinced myself she was just a mutant from some fringe colony, maybe a failed gene splice experiment. I told myself it didn't matter. I'd drop her off at the next interstellar port and let someone smarter sort it out. Except I didn't. I'd started talking to her out loud like a lunatic, narrating everything I did. She never answered, but she listened. Her eye tracked me. She blinked at jokes. Okay, maybe I imagined that last part, but I could swear she chuckled when I accidentally glued my fingers together with sealant foam. Then came the ship. Not just asterisk ship, the asterisk ship. It arrived with no noise, no warning. Just appeared above Port Arco like it had always been there and had only just remembered to show itself. It hovered perfectly still, geometry shifting like it didn't care about physics. The locals scattered. One guy tried to sell it parking space rights. He was vaporized, nicely, just a soft pop and gone. A ramp descended. Light flowed like water, and she walked out. Tall wasn't the right word. She unfolded asterisk, elegant and terrifying in equal measure. Her dress looked woven from eclipse light. Her eyes were twin singularities that politely declined to obey Euclidean logic. She didn't walk so much as asterisk choose not to float. Everyone fled. I stayed. Because, well, I couldn't move. partly fear. Partly awe, mostly because Noodle had woken up, stood beside me and grabbed my hand. And the tall one, the queen, I'd later realize, looked down at our joined hands, looked at me and said one sentence. Not a syllable more. "You saved my daughter. What will it take for you to become one of us?" Now I could have answered a lot of things. Nothing, for instance, or no thanks, or maybe, is this about dental plans again? But all I managed to say was, "Wait, daughter." Then I passed out. Somewhere, I'm sure, my brain was still trying to reboot. I woke up to the sound of classical Nyx-Theron flute music, which, in case you've never heard it, sounds like a space whale being gently threatened with a tax audit. It was oddly calming, in the way a laser scalpel might be calming if it was hovering millimeters from your spleen. My vision came back in stages. First, light, then motion, then a ceiling that looked like it had opinions about my ancestry. Finally, I saw a face. Not just any face, hers, the tall, eclipsy one. Queen Eyebrow Raise herself. She was standing perfectly still at the foot of what I assumed was a bed, although it might have been a sentient couch trying to impersonate furniture. "I fainted," I croaked. She nodded, gravely, like I had just declared war on a toaster. "You suffered a cerebral disruption," she said. "Your biochemistry reacted poorly to direct contact with sovereign presence." "Right," I said. "Let's go with that. Definitely not because you said something terrifying and my nervous system responded by hitting the nope button." She tilted her head. "That is not uncommon." "Good to know." I sat up slowly, expecting pain, disorientation, maybe a floating headache orb. What I got was worse. The bed cooed, actually cooed. Did the bed just purr? "It is pleased by your cellular activity," the queen replied. "Okay. I've had worse compliments." The room was a masterclass in not being subtle. Everything was alive or pretending to be. Walls pulsed faintly like they were breathing. Light oozed from fixtures that might have once been jellyfish. A floating teacup orbited me politely, offering a beverage that smelled like toasted starlight and mild regret. I declined, politely. "You never insult alien tea. That's just diplomacy 101. The queen stepped closer. I noticed she didn't walk so much as resonate with the floor. She didn't cast a shadow. Instead, shadows moved out of her way like obedient pets. "Where's the kid?" I asked, rubbing the back of my neck. "In the resonance chamber," she said. "Healing, recalibrating." "Good, she didn't try to bite anyone, did she?" "She bit Zarthais." I laughed loudly. "That guy deserves it, and you know it." The queen blinked. It might have been approval. "She spoke of you," she said. "Called you soft and strange. Said you smell like old metal and unwashed dreams." "That's actually more accurate than I'd like." She stepped even closer. This time, I swear I felt the air taste different. Like cinnamon and ozone and subtle judgment. "You are not Nyx-Theron," she said. "Yet you intervened without demand, without knowledge. You cradled her, shielded her. You risked without reason." I scratched my head. I thought she was just some orphaned mutant, maybe a genetically gifted sewer child. I didn't know she was vampire royalty. "And now that you do." I paused, still not biting me right. Her eyes shimmered, not without consent. I gave her a thumbs up. "Cool, let's keep that on the record." She gestured, and the wall parted like dramatic drapes with opinions. A corridor extended beyond, winding in an impossible geometry that gave me vertigo just looking at it. "Walk with me," she said. It wasn't really a request. We moved through the ship, which I learned was called Vox Thales Asterisk, meaning something like whisper that binds or possibly sassy echo, depending on dialect. Every hallway pulsed with ambient data, strands of biolight threading through the walls, delivering sensory information like veins in a sleeping god. "Your species," she said as we strolled, "believes in linear time, mechanical evolution, resource-based war. You build your ships from dead things. Metal, plastic, obsolete logic." "Well," I said, "some of us still use duct tape, too." She ignored that, or possibly didn't understand sarcasm. "Our vessels are grown," she continued. "They are born, shaped, nurtured. We weave memory into them. They remember the stars they pass." "Sounds like your ships have better childhoods than I did." She stopped, turned to face me. "Do you mock as a form of defense?" "Only always." We reached a chamber that throbbed gently with violet light. Inside, the kid, Noodle, I refused to stop calling her that, was floating in a cocoon of translucent fluid. Pulsing threads wrapped around her, transmitting energy, memories, warmth. She looked peaceful, whole. "She has already bonded to you," the queen said. "It cannot be undone." I turned slowly, bonded. "She shared essence with you in the moment of rescue. Primitive, instinctive but binding. I held up my hands. Look, I just carried her out of some rubble. I didn't sign up for a blood pact or whatever interstellar co-parenting contract this is. She studied me, and yet you stayed. There it was, the heart of the thing, the part I hadn't even admitted to myself. She looked scared, I said. I've been scared, I knew that look. The Queen regarded me like I was a particularly curious rock. Perhaps, she said softly, you are more Nyxtherin than you realize. I frowned. If this ends with a cloak and a dramatic tattoo, I want veto rights. From behind, something chittered. I turned to see a creature that looked like a praying mantis had mated with a violin. It handed me a small, twitching box. What's this? Translator symbiote, she said. You will need it. The box wiggled. Wait, this thing goes asterisk and asterisk me. Behind the ear, it will burrow painlessly. I held it like it was a grenade made of teeth. I'm gonna name it Kevin. She blinked again. I was getting good at spotting that. Very well. Kevin the symbiote jumped. I screamed. It latched on with the gentleness of 1,000 rubber kisses. Everything went quiet for a moment, like the universe paused to decide whether to laugh or throw up. Then Kevin whispered into my head, /. Hello, I'm Kevin. I contain 72 dialects and mild existential dread. I exhaled. You and me both, buddy. The Queen moved toward the center of the chamber. There is more, but it will come in time. For now, rest, heal, listen. And if I do? I asked. She smiled, a rare, terrifying thing. Then you will be very confused at dinner. And just like that, she vanished into mist. Kevin helpfully whispered, she does that, great, Mist Queens. Bonded vampire kids, talking parasites. I had a bad feeling I was going to need better socks. Kevin developed opinions overnight. That was the first thing I noticed when I woke up the next morning, if you could call it morning aboard a ship that didn't believe in linear time and thought circadian rhythms were a myth invented by inferior species. The lights gently adjusted as I stirred, and Kevin, who now lived behind my ear like an overly chatty conscience, greeted me with what he probably thought was affection. / Your neural patterns indicate inefficient rest. You dreamed of sandwiches and also shame. Don't judge me, I grumbled, sitting up. It was a really good sandwich. / With pickles. You're violating the sacred privacy of dream snacks. The ship hummed gently around me, as if laughing. Probably was. Vox Thalis had the unnerving habit of feeling amused by things I didn't understand, like a cat watching a dog try to understand a mirror. I stepped out into the corridor and immediately regretted it. There stood Zarthais. 7 feet of sneering, fungus-wrapped arrogance, wearing armor that pulsed like it had indigestion. His expression suggested that my face personally offended 3 of his ancestral bloodlines. You, he said, voice dripping with disdain and a faint garlic undertone, are a mistake. Wow, I replied. Good morning to you, too, tall, moldy, and emotionally repressed. His eyes narrowed. You insult the Queen by pretending to belong here. I'm not pretending. I'm here under royal invitation. Technically, I'm bonded. Emotionally, spiritually, and, possibly symbiotically. Also, Kevin says hi. / Hello, Zarthais. Your posture suggests unresolved trauma. Zarthais hissed. Your parasite dares to mock me. Trust me, I said, stepping past him. Kevin doesn't dare. He thrives on it. The corridor grew wider as I walked. Not physically, mind you. It just felt bigger, like it had decided I deserved more space to process my embarrassment. The court was in session today. That's what they told me anyway. What they meant was, a bunch of ancient beings who bleed metaphors are going to float in a circle and glare at each other while pretending they're not gossiping. I arrived late, naturally. Everyone turned as I entered. The Queen sat, or floated, or hovered, or something regal, in the center of the chamber, flanked by advisors with names like Velhun and Zatri, who looked like they'd each eaten at least one son in their lifetimes and still had room for dessert. The Princess Noodle, though no one else dared call her that, stood beside her mother, now fully recovered. She looked taller somehow, more composed. Her eyes sparkled when she saw me, which was either affection or plotting, possibly both. The Queen gestured. He arrives. I do, I said. Fashionably, blame Kevin. He wouldn't stop lecturing me on dream architecture. / Inaccurate. You were distracted by a reflection of your own face. You made duck lips. You promised never to bring that up. The Queen raised one brow. Is Kevin sentient? Only legally, I said. Morally, debatable. Everyone stared. Zatri, who resembled a translucent jellyfish wearing an opera cape, floated forward. The human must prove value. I bring snacks, I offered. Also sarcasm and a surprisingly high tolerance for nonsense. No, Zarthais growled, stepping into the circle. He must undergo the rite of knowing. The queen paused. That is unorthodox. He claims place among us. Let him see asterisk us. Let him understand. See, understand. Look, if this is going where I think it is, I should warn you, I once had a panic attack during a virtual reality aquarium tour. The dolphins got too real. The queen studied me. Do you consent to the rite? Is it dangerous? Yes. Will Kevin be okay? I'm already making backup copies of myself. Okay, I sighed. Let's do it. They led me to a room that wasn't a room. It existed inside something else. It hummed with knowledge and pressure and smelled faintly like static and broken memories. The rite involved a crown of living crystal and what I can only describe as an injection of emotionally charged bioplasma directly into the prefrontal cortex. 10 out of 10 would asterisk not recommend as a recreational activity. The moment it activated, my mind went sideways. I fell through memories not my own, ages of Nyxtheran history cascading through my neurons like a galactic fire hose. I saw the birth stars, their species emerging from the womb of a dead nebula. I witnessed the great severance when they fled Earth eons ago, misunderstood and hunted by early humans who thought them demons. I saw love, war. We were invited to a feast. Well, invited might be the wrong word. Summoned carries a slightly more threatening energy but feels more accurate. One of the Queen's assistant attendants, who looked like a coral reef had sprouted legs and a clipboard, appeared at my chamber door and said, in a voice that sounded like two galaxies rubbing together, "You will dine tonight." I blinked at her. Okay, but can I wear pants? She didn't answer, but she did hand me a robe that shimmered every time I had an anxious thought, which was often. Kevin piped up from behind my ear as I examined the ensemble. According to ceremonial protocol, wearing this garment signifies submission, openness, and digestive preparedness. Digestive what now? You may want to hydrate. That was not comforting. I hydrated anyway. The dining hall was massive, organic architecture that grew as you walked into it. I'm not even being poetic. It literally expanded in response to new guests, like a polite sea creature trying to make room for everyone at Thanksgiving. The Queen sat at the head of the table, if you could call it a table. It floated. It pulsed. It made soft, purring noises when someone placed a cup on it. I did not trust it. Noodle sat to her right, looking equal parts radiant and mischievous. When she saw me, she gave a little wave with emotion that screamed, "Please don't embarrass me in front of the immortal elders." I waved back awkwardly, then tripped on a root that wasn't there 10 seconds earlier. "You are late," said the Queen without looking up. "I was emotionally dressing," I replied, trying to regain my balance with dignity. There was no dignity. Kevin helpfully noted. I took my seat, which conformed unsettlingly to my backside and made a sighing noise as it adjusted. The rest of the court was already present. Translucent advisors, shimmering generals, and one large, wheezing being that I assumed was either a diplomat or an ornamental fungus. The first course arrived. A floating orb drifted down in front of me and dissolved, revealing what looked like a cube of rainbow light and sounded like distant applause. It hovered politely, awaiting consumption. "What is it?" I asked. Noodle leaned in. "Flavor of gratitude." "Flavor of what now?" The Queen glanced my way. "Here, food is memory, emotion. The first course honors your act of selflessness." Cautiously, I poked it with my fork. It squeaked. Then it began to dissolve into a vapor that I accidentally inhaled. I saw a vision of my younger self, 4 years old, hugging my mom on a rainy spaceport deck, crying because I lost my favorite stuffed starfish. I felt warm arms. I tasted cocoa. I felt safe. When the memory faded, I blinked rapidly and wiped at my eyes. Wow, that was intimate. "Dessert gets worse," someone whispered nearby. The second course was something called *synthroot nostalgia. It arrived in the form of a fluid that adjusted flavor depending on what I missed the most asterisk. I thought about home, about Earth, about fried onion rings and terrible indie music, and that one girl from the academy who threw a drink in my face but still smiled when she did it. The fluid turned a shade of burnt gold. It tasted like every goodbye I didn't want to say. "Just checking," I said aloud. "Do you serve fries here, emotional or otherwise?" The Queen's lip twitched. A smile, a spasm. Too early to tell. The third course was solid. A small spiral of what looked like crystallized ink, accompanied by a flickering data scroll. Kevin translated, "This is ambivalence loaf. It is traditionally served during awkward diplomatic standstills and deeply confusing romantic proposals." "That tracks," I muttered, eyeing Noodle, who was very deliberately not looking at me. She'd changed since I found her. Not just in the obvious ways, no more blood, no more limping, but in posture, presence. She held herself like someone born into gravity and choosing not to obey it. I leaned closer and whispered, "So, what's the verdict? Am I winning over the in-laws or slowly digging my own ceremonial grave?" She tilted her head slightly. "You're doing fine." "That's not comforting. That's all you're getting." The Queen raised her glass, full of something that shimmered like bottled auroras, and the hall fell silent. "We honor the one who disrupted fate," she said, "who rescued blood of mine not with knowledge nor obligation but with impulse, the rawest form of choice." A soft murmur passed through the room. One of the advisors actually looked impressed, or ill, hard to tell. The Queen continued, "Tonight you are no longer visitor, you are thread." "Thread?" I asked, /singularity thread, a rare anomaly. "A being whose choices intersect with multiple futures." Kevin explained, "Is this because I once flipped a coin to decide which sandwich to eat and ended up grounded on IO for a week?" Unclear, but possibly. Noodle reached out and placed her hand over mine. I froze, the hall watched, the air held its breath. "You're tangled in us now," she said, "but maybe that's not bad." "Define tangled." She didn't, she just smiled. The final course arrived. A thin strip of shimmering fabric that folded itself into a shape on my plate. Kevin muttered, "You are now being served your first dose of bound memory. Eat carefully. Side effects include perspective and minor identity destabilization." "Great," I said. "I love dinner that comes with existential symptoms." I took a bite, the universe blinked. I was her, not metaphorically. I was asterisk in asterisk her Noodle years ago. I felt her first breath, her first fear, the weight of expectations carved into her bones before she could form words, the longing, the isolation. The moment she realized she was not allowed to want. Then I was me again, plate empty, room still, my face wet with tears I hadn't noticed. The Queen stood. "You have eaten of us," she said. "Now we will see what remains." No one clapped. No one moved, but something in the ship pulsed like a heartbeat sinking to mine. Kevin whispered, "You are now 3% more Nyxtherin than you were yesterday." "Does that come with benefits?" I asked softly. "Dental. And possibly immortality." "Cool." Noodle squeezed my hand once gently. I squeezed back. I had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but tonight at least I wasn't alone. The ship decided to redecorate my quarters while I was sleeping. Again. When I opened my eyes, the ceiling had been replaced with a projection of Nyxtherin ancestral constellations, twisting threads of light that pulsed in sync with my heart rate. A bed that previously had the texture of polite moss now felt like sleeping on philosophical marshmallows, and the air smelled faintly of citrus and calculated optimism. Your emotional trajectory has shifted. The ship is attempting to match your inner landscape. Kevin whispered like a nosy therapist in a bathrobe. "Well, tell it to stop overachieving," I muttered, brushing constellation crumbs off my shoulder. "Last night I dreamed I was being hunted by sentient bagpipes." You require grounding. The court believes you're becoming too fluid. Great, first I'm thread, now I'm soup. I was scheduled for a private audience with the Queen. Again. That made it 3 times this week. I was starting to feel like her new favorite pet project, or, possibly worse, an elaborate joke she was testing on the political elders. I made my way through the hallways, which decided to be spiral-shaped this morning. A few Nyxtherin nobles passed me, their robes whispering behind them like dramatic rumors. One of them nodded at me. That was new. Progress. Or warning. I entered the Queen's chamber without knocking, mostly because the door dissolved on its own like it was excited to see me. She stood at the center, hands clasped behind her back, watching a holographic map of the galaxy bloom and fold like breathing paper. "You're here," she said, not turning. I had a feeling I didn't have a choice. She gave a soft sound that might have been amusement or digestion. "The council is divided," she said. "Some believe your presence is disruption. Others believe it is necessity." I get that a lot. You mock everything. It's either that or cry, and I'm trying not to do both at the same time today. She finally turned. Her eyes bore into me with the force of a black hole having a deeply emotional day. You carry pieces of us now, not just memories. Resonance. You walk in two species. I rubbed the back of my neck. Yeah, Kevin said something about that. He's been making little Nyxtheron jokes now. Last night he told me I had the posture of a sleeping fungus priest. You slouch with majesty. Thank you, Kevin. The Queen gestured and the map contracted into a single glowing thread. There is unrest in the outer systems. The Ebon swarm stirs. Zarthais has proposed an alliance with them. That seems like a terrible idea. It is, but it's politically expedient, and he has support. Let me guess, I said, sinking into a seat that materialized behind me without asking. You want me to be your counteroffer? She didn't respond immediately. Then, you are unpredictable. You broke prophecy. You are not bound by our laws. That makes you dangerous and valuable. Flattering. Do I get a tiara? She stepped closer, too close. The air around her shimmered like thought fog. You could be more, she said. Not just bonded, not just thread. You could be asterisk or asterisk. I blinked. Define ours. A consort, a bridge, a joining of lines, you and the air. Okay, wow. That escalated faster than a warp core argument. You mock again. I panic through humor. It's a brand. Noodle entered then, unannounced, holding a small glowing fruit and biting into it like it owed her rent. She looked from her mother to me and raised a brow. Is this another proposal meeting? Possibly, I said. Hard to tell. There was galaxy talk and some implied destiny. I'm waiting for a musical number. She tossed me a piece of the fruit. I caught it barely and looked at it suspiciously. Will this rewrite my DNA again? Probably not. I took a bite. It was tart, juicy, and filled my mouth with the distinct memory of running barefoot through a thunderstorm as a child. This fruit is emotionally manipulative, I said. Yes, she replied. It's my favorite. The Queen returned to her seat, composed as ever. You are given a choice. Remain as you are, guest, anomaly, amusing footnote. Or take the bite of a cord, become bonded in truth, join us not just in memory but in blood. Kevin hissed, a little too excitedly. You'd gain telepathic permissions, biological upgrades, heightened regenerative capacity, and a tolerance for extreme humidity. Sounds like a spa package. Noodle sat beside me. It's not a trap, but it's not simple either. I don't do simple, I muttered. We noticed. I looked between them, queen and princess, power and potential. One offered eternity through structure, the other offered uncertainty through hope. I stood, popped the last bite of fruit into my mouth. I'll think about it, I said. But just so you know, if I say yes, I want a really cool title. Like Intergalactic Snackbringer or Duke of Questionable Decisions. The Queen didn't smile, but Noodle did. On my way out, Kevin whispered something quietly. Almost too softly to hear. You're falling into something you don't understand. I know, I said, but for once I'm not running from it. The hall shifted behind me, the ship pulsed. And somewhere in the distance, a future I hadn't chosen yet waited with its teeth bared and arms open. I was trying to eat a bowl of self-replicating cereal when the emergency klaxon screamed like a drama major, discovering they weren't the lead. Alert. Breach detected. Defense protocol Delta 9 engaged. Kevin's voice, usually calm and full of passive-aggressive wisdom, now carried the strained tone of a digital librarian watching toddlers rip through ancient manuscripts. What kind of breach? I asked, mouth full of what I think was time-stabilized wheat and emotional regret. The kind with teeth and spores, possibly ill intent. I dropped the spoon. Is it Zarthais? Oh, absolutely. He just monologued into the comms. It was poetic and deeply fungal. I ran. Well, half ran, half skidded through a corridor that had apparently decided now was the perfect moment to reconfigure its floor into an abstract art piece called What If Gravity Was Optional? I flailed, bounced off a few decorative memory lanterns, and nearly collided with a floating meditation orb that looked offended by my existence. Noodle intercepted me halfway down the hall. She was barefoot, holding a glowing staff I hadn't seen before, and radiating enough frustration to curdle milk across dimensions. I leave you alone for 10 minutes, she said, and the ship gets attacked. I was eating breakfast. Emergency breakfasts are not a thing. They are now. A loud boom vibrated through the deck. Something organic and angry roared in the distance. Weapons locker? I asked. She tossed me a bracer. It slithered up my arm and clicked into place with a sound that made my elbow briefly question its life choices. Bioweapon interface complete. Please avoid sarcasm while aiming. Oh no, I said. Kevin S. evolved. We arrived at the atrium, or what used to be the atrium. It had become a battlefield, twisting shadows, shrieking drones, and a lot of what looked like exploding mushrooms having a bad day. Zarthai stood at the center, draped in bioarmor that writhed like a coat made of bad decisions. He held a weapon that looked more like a grudge than a tool, his eyes locked on mine. "You," he snarled, "Threadwalker, pet of the crown." "Pretender, fungus boy," I said, aiming the bracer at his chest. "You're looking extra moldy today." He roared and flung a cluster of spore mines. I ducked. Kevin beeped. "Caution, those spores destabilize molecular cohesion. You may become a philosophical concept." "Neat," I said. "I always wanted to be an abstract metaphor." Noodle was already in motion, dancing across the battlefield with terrifying elegance, staff crackling with energy that hummed like old lullabies and electricity. Every strike she landed dispersed shadow. Every flick of her wrist bent the air. I tried to keep up. Failed. But I did manage to tag a few of Zarthai's minions with my bracer, which launched compact spheres of compressed irony, energy bombs that detonated with a sound like disappointed fathers sighing. One of the minions lunged at me with a hiss. I dodged, barely, and countered with a solid punch enhanced by the bracer's kinetic assist. It flew backward and exploded in a puff of betrayal and damp disappointment. "You're getting better," Noodle said between strikes. "I had a good breakfast." Zarthai bellowed something in Nyxtherin that Kevin refused to translate, probably for legal reasons. He charged, right at me. Of course, I braced, sort of. My version of bracing involved yelling and flailing, but miraculously I stayed upright when his blade met my bracer. Sparks flew, our eyes locked. His breath smelled like compost and ego. "You are not worthy," he hissed. "I'm not trying to be," I grunted, twisting out of the way. "I'm just trying to survive breakfast." He knocked me to the ground, my bracer buzzed in protest. Warning, bone stress level, spicy. Noodle's staff slammed into Zarthai's side before he could finish whatever dramatic sentence he was working on. He staggered, spun, and snarled at her. "Step aside, child," he growled. "He is not your equal. He is not even your species." She didn't move, her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. "He's not yours to judge." Then she spun the staff once, stabbed it into the floor, and whispered a word I didn't catch. Everything went silent. The spores froze midair. The minions crumbled like bad pastries. Zarthai gasped, stepped back, and dropped his weapon, which melted into the floor with a pitiful sigh. The queen arrived then, flanked by her court. She said nothing at first, just looked at the mess, then at Zarthai. "You have betrayed the accord," she said, "and your bloodline." He dropped to his knees, snarling, broken, muttering ancient oaths that sounded like rejected Shakespeare monologues. The queen turned to me. "You are unharmed." "Only emotionally," I said, "but that's been true for a while." Noodle helped me up. I winced. She gave me a look. "You're an idiot." "I'm you're idiot," I said, trying to grin. She rolled her eyes. "We'll see." Zarthai was taken away, probably to somewhere with fewer sharp objects and more echoing corridors of shame. Back in my quarters, which the ship had now themed with soothing blues and mild parental disapproval, I collapsed onto the bed and groaned. Kevin clicked softly. "You survived attempted assassination. Congratulations, you may now choose a victory snack. The morning light, or whatever passed for morning aboard a ship that spun between dimensions like a disco ball with commitment issues. Found me tangled in a web of questions, none of which were easy to untangle. I was sitting cross-legged in the meditation chamber, attempting to coax my mind into something resembling calm, while Kevin, who had taken to offering unsolicited advice, buzzed softly behind my ear. Breathing exercises recommended. Also, do not think about the part where you might be bonded for eternity. Gee, thanks for the pep talk, Kevin. You're a real morale booster. Just trying to keep you from panicking like a cat in zero-G. That was fair. My recent history was enough to make anyone's neurotransmitters stage a rebellion. Noodle entered quietly, her footsteps soft as shadows folding into themselves. She sat beside me without a word, and for a moment we just breathed together, sharing a silence that felt less like emptiness and more like a fragile truce between chaos and hope. "I'm sorry about Zarthai," I said finally. "He seems like the kind of fungus you'd want to quarantine." She smiled, a small, genuine thing that lit her eyes like distant stars catching the first light of a new day. "He was once important, now he's a relic." "Like me?" I asked. She shrugged. "Maybe, but relics can be powerful, sometimes more so than the living." Kevin whispered something about dust accumulation and historical value. I ignored him. The Queen appeared then as quietly as a question asked in a library. You seek answers, she said, yet questions often have sharper teeth. I raised an eyebrow. I'm developing a theory that Nyxtherans really like riddles. She nodded. Riddles bind knowledge and wisdom. You are becoming part of our tapestry, but every thread must know its place. Great, so where's my place? Right between confused human and intergalactic oddity. The Queen regarded me with something like kindness. You will learn, the rite was only the beginning. Noodle stood and extended her hand. Come, I want to show you something. Curiosity, possibly bad judgment, won out, and I followed her through winding corridors that shimmered with latent energy. We arrived at a chamber pulsing with a light that seemed both alive and aware. This is the memory vault, she said. It holds the collective experiences of our kind. To truly understand us, you must walk among our past. I swallowed, walk like with my feet. Metaphorically, she smiled, but the experience will be immersive. I nodded. Kevin muttered something about consent forms and emotional hazard warnings. I ignored that too. The chamber enveloped me, and suddenly I was elsewhere. I stood on a battlefield under twin suns, watching warriors dance with shadows and light, their movements weaving stories older than galaxies. I felt their fears, their hopes, their fierce love for a home they had lost. Then a voice, young, trembling, yet fierce, spoke within me. I am the daughter of a queen, I carry her burden and my own. It was Noodle long ago. I saw her learning to harness the strange power in her blood, struggling with the weight of expectations that threatened to crush her spirit. I felt her loneliness, sharp as a star's edge, and her fierce determination not to be defined by it. I blinked and was back in the chamber, breathless. How? I whispered. The vault connects us, Noodle said. You have touched a part of my soul. Kevin sighed audibly. You are now 7% more Nyxtheran. Great. That's officially more than half my friends. She laughed. You are changing, and that change is both gift and challenge. I looked at her, really looked. The princess was not just an alien royalty or a rescued ward. She was a person, complex. Fragile, strong in ways I was only beginning to understand. So, I said, how do I keep from messing this up? Noodle smiled, leaning close so her breath warmed my ear. By being yourself, even if that self is utterly ridiculous. That was probably the best advice I'd gotten since Kevin suggested I try deep breathing instead of deep panicking. The Queen watched us quietly. Tomorrow, you will meet the elders. I groaned, the ones who make Zarthais look friendly. She smiled. They are not as fearsome as they seem, but they demand respect. Kevin whispered, warning, high probability of awkwardness and existential questioning. I sighed. Why do I feel like this whole thing is an intergalactic episode of a reality show, and I'm the unwitting contestant? Noodle laughed, because it is. And somehow, that made everything feel a little less terrifying. Outside, the stars spun in endless patterns, and somewhere deep in the ship, the memory vault hummed softly. A reminder that the past was never truly gone, only waiting to be understood. The ceremony was held at the edge of a collapsing star cluster, which, if you ask me, was a dramatic place to say, I do. But Nyxtherans have a flair for the theatrical that makes even soap operas look like amateur hour. I stood beside Noodle, no longer just a rescued kid, but a queen in her own right, glowing faintly with the steady pulse of her bloodline. The ship had shaped itself into a cathedral of living light around us, twisting and folding like the universe itself was holding its breath. Kevin was nervously buzzing behind my ear, offering a running commentary that was about 80% anxiety and 20% dry wit. Reminder. You are about to bond biologically, metaphysically, and socially with a species whose idea of honeymoon involves quantum entanglement and possibly shared consciousness. Fantastic, I muttered. Just what I always wanted. The Queen stood nearby, regal and silent, her gaze steady as a supernova. She held the ceremonial blade, an elegant thing that looked part crystal, part star-forged metal, and all ominous. You have walked the path of thread, she said, voice calm but charged with power. You have seen the past, faced the present, and accepted the unknown future. I nodded, heart pounding. The memories of every step, the laughter, the fear, the chaos, flowed through me like a river of stars. I was not the same man who had stumbled into that crater on Pharos 9. Noodle reached for my hand, her grip firm and warm. Are you ready? She asked, eyes shimmering. As I'll ever be, I replied. Does this come with dental benefits? She laughed, The blade touched my skin, a spark of energy rushing through my veins like the first shock of a new world waking up. My DNA shimmered, folding and unfolding in ways that defied human logic. Kevin squawked in surprise and delight. Integration successful. You now share 87% of Nyxtheran biological markers. Does that make me 87% more awesome? I asked. Statistically probable. The Queen stepped forward, placing her hand over ours. Together, you embody the thread, the bridge between worlds, the future woven from past and present. As the energy settled, I felt a profound connection, not just to Noodle or the Queen, but to the entire Nyxtheran legacy. A web of memory, hope, and resilience stretched through me. Later, as the stars spun around the ship like a slow dance, I found myself sitting with Noodle on the observation deck. "So," I said, "what now?" She smiled, tracing patterns in the air that left trails of light. "Now we build together." I chuckled. "I guess that means learning to negotiate with fungal warlords, hosting interdimensional tea parties, and figuring out how to explain this to my therapist." She laughed, her voice like a melody woven from light and shadow. "And you?" "I'm still me," I said. "Just a weirder, slightly immortal version." Kevin buzzed softly. "You have exceeded expectations. The future is uncertain but decidedly less boring." I looked at Noodle, her eyes reflecting distant galaxies and endless possibilities. "Thanks for saving me," I said. She smiled. "No," she replied. "Thank you for saving me." And in that moment, under a canopy of stars and living light, I knew that some journeys don't end, they evolve. We were no longer just human and vampire princess. We were the thread, woven together, bound forever, dancing across the cosmos with laughter and light.